Now let's start with get API calls, which will read the data from the table and it will list the data in the UI. So as a first step, we should create a folder under src as a db. And we will initialize the client in this. So index.js, within this, let's initialize the Prisma client here. So we'll import the Prisma client and just remove this one. So we'll take this Prisma client and create an object out of it. And we'll export this Prisma client so that we can use this Prisma object and make the REST API calls to the database. So this is the first step. So since we have this particular object, so we'll create an interface to hold this data. So under src, I'm going to create a models folder, and within the models folder, I'll create a post.ts. It will act as an interface for us, and we'll create the interface post, and it has a ID, and we can copy the same columns from here. So we'll define the data type as well. So it is of a number and a string. Oh, there's a spelling mistake. Okay. So now copy, and the date would be date type. So this is our interface. Now let's create an API. Before we actually look into the UI, let's start with writing the API first to get all the posts that we have in this particular screen. We'll load this data. So to write the API, we need to go to the src. Under src, we should create a pages folder. This is the standard for Next.js framework. So under the pages, we should create a folder called API, and all the APIs should go inside this. Okay, so within the API, since it is posts, so I'm going to create a posts folder, and within the post folder, to get the default records, we have to write index.ts. So this will have the actual API to get the data. So within this, let me import the Next.js API request and response. So both the request and response are imported. And we will import the Prisma that we created. Okay, this DB should go to src, not under app. Okay. So the DB and the index So we imported Prisma. Now let's write the actual API to fetch the list of posts. So for that we have to write export a function. We have to write the export function, and it is async function. I'll write it as a handler for now. So all the requests will come to the same API. So within this we'll get a request of next API request, and the response that we wanted to return is going to be next API response. So these are the two parameters that it will have. So the export, oh, there's a spelling mistake, default. Okay, so this will, all the API calls will come to this particular handler only. Within this, so we'll check the type of the API request method, and we'll perform the action accordingly. So if it is get method, since of course it is get method to get all the posts, so within this let's just add a try catch just to get hold of the exception, and we'll simply response. So to return the data, we have to use a response. I'll say 500 since it is server error. JSON of will return the exception if there is an exception. Okay, otherwise within this it is straightforward and very simple. So we'll get a list of posts. For this it's async method, so we have to use Prisma dot post dot find many, so that it will return all the records. But this is a Prisma, and the post is the one that we mentioned here. This is a post, so we have to use the exact table name. Okay, so now it will return the list of records from the table. Now we should respond with status code of 200. Of course it is successful. Along with this we have to return the actual content as a JSON response. So here we'll say posts. Okay, now it will return the data. So the URL is going to be API localhost 3000 API posts, and the method will be get method. It will return the record. Now let's get this data and display on the UI. So let's go to the main page. So right now we have all this content. We'll just get rid of this. So I'm just removing everything. Okay, now it is empty. Also I just wanted to remove this background of black color also. So this is plain. Okay, I know why this is showing error, since there is nothing here. It is expecting something. Okay, now it is empty page. So let's start writing the code. So to get all the list of posts, okay, first thing we need something to hold the data. So we'll call it as posts and set posts. So this will get all the list of posts, and it will be use state, and the use state is going to be array of record that we get. Okay, so this will be the initial page, initial data that we wanted to show. Also when we make the API call, I need a loader just to display while reading the data. So for that I'll use a loader. So I'll just create a loader boolean true. So it's loading, and I'll set the loading here, the property, and the initial value as true. Okay, now to display the, first of all I need to get the API posts. For that I need to make the API call. So for that I use effect, so use effect. If there is nothing coming, I will return the empty array. So within this use effect, I'll use the fetch call to make the API call, I know it will be API dot posts. It will get the data because it should be under API and posts. Okay, so when I make this call, so then if I get the data as a response, I'll get the JSON out of it. Since it is a fetch call, it won't give direct JSON. Okay, once that is done, then I'll take that data and I'll set it to the posts. Okay, here set posts data, but here if you see data dot posts that we need to use, data dot posts. So it will get the data. Since it is done, I'll set the loading to false. So until I get the data, I have to show the loading message. Okay, also to now, since I'm getting the date posts here, I'm setting it here. Now I need to display. So to display the data, I need to iterate this. Okay, here, within here, I'll take UL. It's a so it is throwing error because I need to set this as a use line. Otherwise, by default, Next.js components are server side. So this should be included on the top of the page. Okay, there is an issue. It is throwing 404 API and posts. Okay, let me just correct it. So if you have just one API without ID, post ID, so this is not the right way to implement it. So let me just change it to posts.ts and move this to API, and we don't need this post. Okay, now it should work. Now if you see, we got the record from the posts. This is the API call that we made, and we received the record from the Prisma table, this particular record that we got. So this is how we can read the record. Now let's add one more record here. Okay, now we have two records here. Now when we refresh this, it should display two records. So now we got two records. Now let's create one record and push it to the database. Now let's look at the post call.